What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host and public enemy number one among New Orleans Pelicans fans, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are going to go through our one goal, objective thing we're monitoring or want to see for every NBA team down the final few weeks of the regular season. We'll be beginning with the Eastern Conference, doing the dangerous task of going alphabetically. So we will begin with Atlanta, but after that, it gets weird. You never know what's going to happen with the alphabet when it comes to Grant and I. However, before we get started here, and we'll spend 5 to 6 minutes on each team, roughly, at least we'll try to, and then maybe we'll expand on one or two teams, depends on how it goes, but we'll try and keep the pace moving and not publish an 8-hour episode like we did last week or whatever it ended up being. That second part of the West one was long, Grant. But first and foremost, before we get started here, how the heck are you doing, Mr. Hughes?
I'm doing well. I feel like me doing well is mostly luck, but there could be some other factors that we're not getting. Should we like try? Can I just try to needle the Pelicans fan base a little bit more and just by
I think we already did that by being, I guess, not complimentary enough. That was this. It didn't bother me. I was aware of it, and I thanked Rome, and Discord was like in the YouTube comments just yelling at people. So I really appreciated that. But I did read the comments, and I was more flabbergasted than frustrated or upset. We've been through this. I let randos on the internet ruin my day or my mood far more often than you ever had because you're a fucking legend. And that's rubbed off on me a little bit. I used to be way worse with this stuff. But I was just interesting, and I mentioned this to you, the disconnect between what I thought was a really good and like positive leaning discussion, because spoiler alert, for anyone who wants to know how the sausage is made, I'm not going to clip the negative stuff and put it on YouTube because I don't want to deal with that BS response. If you want to get mad while listening to the whole podcast, hell yeah, you earned that right. When we say something negative about your team that you disagree with, but I'm normally only posting like the positive stuff or those types of questions. So it was just interesting how inept I was at, I guess, gauging the room or about the tenor of our discussion versus how it would be received by Pelicans fans on YouTube. And so I found that interesting. I was more shocked than upset than anything.
Yeah. I mean, the name of the game, at least for us, although this may explain why we are where we are, is like not to be inflammatory on purpose. Like that's never the goal. Like it's like, in fact,
the tagline is trying to be the least insufferable national NBA podcast out there.
The goal is in fact to be like an antidote to that kind of stuff. Like we're really not hot taking it. Like that's not the goal. Two, what you're describing does not sound like a you problem. Like it's not, you are not the one, your sensitivity or whatever, or inability to judge like what's gonna, raise the ire of a particular fan base. Like, no, you judged correctly and you had some irrational actors that you couldn't have foreseen. Like that's all it is. Like, was it you that said everybody wants maybe it was someone in Discord. Sorry, I forget who said it, but like everybody wants what Ben Golliver calls generic praise for their team. I forget who said it.
I can't remember who said that.
But that's 100% right. Like, I mean, and no, that's not 100% right. That's 100% right for some subsection of people that are going to take like a measured discussion trying to determine like what's going on with your team in like an ostensibly fair way as criticism or as like evidence that you don't know what you're talking about. So, it's not a you problem. It's not an us problem. It's a few misguided stragglers in the comments problems.
There's also, I think the two-fold for me is what I think I've noticed is that, and I've said this so many times, the local coverage on pretty much all these teams is just so good and nuanced that if you compare that to this podcast, when we're trying to talk about all 30 teams, you're going to come away probably disappointed or unimpressed. And so I honestly don't, we have our fandom roots, but like, we're not coming at this from the pure fan perspective. And so part of me wonders, like, is it just insufferable to listen to someone talk about your team when they've watched them less than you, even if they're better at what they do overall? And so I think that has sort of, because of how good the local coverage is. And look, there is some toxic national coverage. There is some lazy national coverage. I'm not here to say that there isn't, but I just wonder if that's created sort of an inherent resentment to where you're going into, well, if you're talking about every team, you clearly don't know enough about my team type of deal. And I wonder if that goes into the reactions. And then kind of the other thing is, it does feel like and I've definitely felt this way in the past, but as I've gotten older, I'm just more open to discussion and admitting when I'm like flat out wrong or don't know. Like the discussion about the Heat, where I basically boiled it down to aliens because I have no
Right.
idea what the fuck is
Don't
going
know.
on. And I'm comfortable saying it that
Yeah.
way, but it does feel like people just want to, and you get this in like, even when like comments are praising you, there's a lot of, well, actually, like, I need to show you how much I know. When it's like these, like when you're not necessarily having an interaction with someone, but like the need to comment or to disagree is just like, I know this. And I guess I've never had that. I think when I'm challenged, that like response might come out to me like, well, I need to defend my take. But I guess I've
Mhm.
never had that need to be like, well, no, like I know this and I need to let you know that I know it, or I differ from you, not even just in a measurable way, but I
Mhm.
differ from you in the slightest way. And I need to let you know why. And like I need to turn that into a big thing. It feels like there's more of that for some reason.
I think it's just a symptom of like everybody gets to live in an echo chamber now, just because that's how internet culture works. And so like the second that you can very much insulate yourself inside the Pelicans are the greatest team on planet Earth, and nothing they do is anything other than the product of like their greatness, and it's all by design. Like you can live in that world. It's easy. Like you could just find some like-minded people on your very, whatever sites you like to read or whatever your Twitter lists are, like easy. You can live in that
Oh
world.
yeah.
And that's pretty comfortable, and that's kind of a huge problem societally, like outside of the NBA discourse that we got to work through. And then like when you're in that little silo where everybody thinks the same thing and everybody just like pats each other on the back for agreeing, it's not great to hear someone that disagrees with you, and like you're not equipped anymore to have a civil conversation about it. And so again, Dan, not a you problem.
No,
Can
I'm
we
just it's
can
just
we hold on?
uh,
No. I know you. I'm just like trying to bait you. Should we now try to piss off all 30 fan bases as we go through these teams?
yeah, I was gonna say maybe we do that. And then I sometimes wonder if we're too accessible, and I'm not going to change. I mean, I haven't been really as active in Discord the past. Hey, join our Discord so that I don't have to interact as much because my life has been like way too chaotic the past weeks. I feel guilty that I haven't been around in Discord as much. And so it's when you look at the podcasts that are way bigger than us, there's like I can't even think of anyone that interacts or reads the comments or responds to the comments regularly. And so it's just like, is that level of detachment need to be there? And I don't want to have that level of detachment. I like our Discord members are fantastic, and we've had great discussions and content inspirations there. And the mailbag questions are always fun. But I've also thought a lot about that, where it's like, no, Zach Lowe is not seeing what anyone's criticizing him about because he's not interacting with his listeners. And it's like, I think the Dunker Spot does interact with their listeners on Twitter, and they have their mailbags. But like by and large, like the big podcast, like Bill Simmons is not interacting with his listeners on a regular. We're reading the comments, I'm sure, on a regular basis. And so maybe we need to strike that balance, but I'm not going to be completely inaccessible. But that was something else I thought about, where it's like, we want to be more popular or build up the pod. It's, do we interact or read our comments less? Is that the recipe?
I think it works the other way. Once you get popular enough, you don't have to do anything else. Like you just like put your stuff out there and don't worry about it because you're bulletproof.
That was 8.5 minutes on absolute
Yeah.
vanity.
Timestamp that one. What are you going to call that?
The intro, I think.
Okay.
Let's get to the Atlanta Hawks. And so we both sort of have our own things here for each team, and we'll get into them as we deem fit. What is your thing? I know what it's going to be for this team. I'm ready to kind of lampoon it because I'm over it, but
Yeah. I'm kind of over it. Well, no, I'm not over it because there's something about this concept that like just tickles the part of my brain that is always kind of had this weird feeling about this type of player. So I think the Hawks, I don't know that this is their goal. I think they would much prefer that to not have to work through this right now. But Trae Young is hurt, and I think it would at least be a good use of the remaining games the Atlanta Hawks are going to play this season to kind of like kick around like a little thought experiment. What would it be like if Trae Young were not here? Because he's not going to play. He's hurt. I don't know what the official designation was, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be out for the season. I don't know why they would bring him
they
back.
have him classified as indefinitely. And it's
Yeah.
I'm not saying this in jest, but like left pinky finger surgeries is what he had.
Right. So we'll see. Whatever. I think so. It's a pretty simple argument to me. It's been 6 years. There was the high of the conference finals appearance. Trae Young is a phenomenal offensive player. It's like the numbers back it up. He's one of the best lob passers in the league. He's, can be an offense unto himself sometimes, not to the absolute highest level always, but sometimes, he's been the reason the Hawks are like first or second in offensive efficiency, like really, high end offensive player. That type of player, when they don't defend and when their off ball stuff is not useful, like this is a very much like talking head argument of like guys kind of sour on that. And John Collins, I think, comes to mind. And there's never really been anyone that's like over the moon about playing with Trae, as far as I know. So if you've had 6 years of this, you have the iffy leadership, you have, he's already signed. It's not like you're going to get out from, you're not going to make a decision on his next contract. Like that decision's been made. It was probably the right decision to max him. I think the Hawks, there's value in them kind of seeing what this looks like. And then the next logical step is like, what could we get for him potentially if we like how things might be with DeJounte Murray and Jalen Johnson and whatever else? There will be more house cleaning, but you've changed coaches more than once with this guy. You've changed the surrounding, supporting cast. You've changed front offices. So like, this is the last card that hasn't been played. If you're trying to figure things out, maybe the answer is still we build around Trae Young and we just do different things around him. But I think maybe it's not. To me, this is an opportunity. The stretch of the season just to kind of see what life is like without him and if there's any appeal to that.
I feel like I've seen enough. And the answer is what we knew the answer was going to be. The defense will be better, even though Trae Young has defended better over the past year and a half. The defense is going to be better. Its peak is going to be neither high enough nor sustainable enough to say this team is better without Trae Young. And it's going to be the same thing when you're looking at how the offense is run around DeJounte Murray. And so if people want to have the trade Trae Young discussion, it needs to be framed as because the Hawks want to rebuild, not because they're better off without Trae Young. You are not, in my mind, flipping him and recalibrating, reorienting, reoptimizing the roster. It's not possible. We've kind of seen it. Like, yeah, they had some good defensive luck, but if they don't have it on some night, then they just don't have the offensive juice to get by. And so I'm more interested with this team. The goal needs to be like, if you want to move on from Murray, that's fine. But like, the non-stars, like you need to figure out what's kind of going on here. Is Onyeka Okongwu the heir apparent to Clint Capella, or do you want to bring him off the bench? Do you view him as more of a 4? We know Jalen Johnson is part of the core, but like, is Vic Krejci's defense officially a thing? Do we want to keep him around long-term if we're Atlanta? Is DeAndre Hunter? He's cut mid-range jumpers out of his diet. Coming off the bench has looked good on him. Has he entrenched himself to the core? And so there's that question of you need to decide whether you want to continue building around Trae Young. But I need to emphasize that there is just close to zero possibilities in my mind where this team is better off in the short term without him. And so if you want to have the Trae Young discussion, to me, I think it needs to be framed as, well, then the Hawks want to rebuild. And because you have Trae Young, I'm going to keep trying to build around Trae Young. And that's going to entail now monitoring the supporting cast around him, which I don't think has been optimized to his greatest strengths enough. And again, he hasn't adapted as well over the years. He plays off the ball a little bit more now. Like, I don't think that they've just built a roster that, I don't want to say insulates him defensively, but that is going to be top tier defensively with the personnel around him. And just like the weird stuff in the front court. So it's like, I look at this team and I view Trae Young and Jalen Johnson as the guys moving forward. And like, you need to kind of figure out what you have around them. Now that gets a lot harder because Trae Young's not playing. Sadiq Bey is done for the season. Okongwu just came back, I believe, from his injury. But like, that's to me, like what I'm watching for with this team is who of the others actually makes sense around the two players that you should be building around.
Yeah, I think, look, I think your point is well taken. I would just say, if you're gonna say that the Hawks are not a better team without Trae Young, you have to also consider the fact that they've had negative point differentials 4 years running, have topped out at 43 wins, and Trae Young's been mostly healthy. So it's like, yeah, and again, that doesn't take away from what you're saying, which is like, it's the other guys. It's not Trae Young, which I think is probably mostly right. I think maybe a more interesting question would be like, what do you think the Hawks will do? Because we know how the league works, and sometimes, it's a matter of, when you just go back to Damian Lillard, go back to whoever you want to use as like, I don't know, there's some like whispers, like maybe he's the next guy to go. Like those are out there for Trae Young. And you pair those with like a team that has underperformed, I think by most people's estimations. And it's like that snowball kind of starts rolling down the hill. And it's like, it doesn't roll back up. It just gets bigger and goes faster. Do you think that Trae Young will be on the Hawks in 1 year is like crazy, but I mean, an offseason trade wouldn't stun me in like 18 months or something like that, or the deadline of the 2025 trade deadline. Is Trae still on the Hawks?
I think he is, just because I don't know, aside from maybe the Spurs, and then that's like the classic Nets with Mikal Bridges to the Rockets scenario where you're just getting back your own picks and there's a level of like,
that's
in that. Weird. I also just think like you're Atlanta. Trae Young is one of the best franchise players of all time. You don't give up this player. I think the bigger question is how, if we had to build the optimal roster around, forget about trade assets, who's available in free agency or cap situation. You need to sit down, map that out. And if it involves actually rebuilding around Trae Young and taking a step, then that's what you need to do. And so that's the route I would actually go. Do I think they will? This front office is unpredictable to me. I just don't see the team out there that's going to come in and bowl them over with the offer. I mean, again, the Spurs aren't the type of team that's just going to overpay.
No.
Maybe the Wembanyama trajectory changes that. And we know what the Lakers can do in terms of pick offerings, but it's like Austin Reeves and 3 firsts is that's going to be their best offer. Like you can pass on that and not really flinch.
And now if you're Trae Young though, and the Hawks come to you and say, we're going to rebuild around you, might get ugly for a year or two. How do you feel about that? Maybe he's the guy that maybe it's him and not the Hawks that's saying like, I'm not sure I want to hang around for like a year or two while we try to swap out the parts, because it's not going to be that easy for them to necessarily. I don't know. Like I sometimes I understand the inclination to like push back against like, he's the next guy to get traded. It just feels like, I don't know. It's a gut thing. It feels like he's going to be the next, in the next batch of throw Towns in there or whatever, but he feels like he's in that group.
But it's like you harp on that for not you specifically, but if you harp on it long enough, you might get there because so few teams win titles. And so it's like, just think about the way people viewed it with Miles Turner, or obviously a lower level, the way people view it with Towns now. And it's like, okay, well, he signed another contract in Minnesota. Yeah, maybe he eventually gets moved. That doesn't make you right though, just because you said this for years and years and he was finally moved. This feels like a closer like facsimile to, remember when people just thought that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was eventually going to get traded out of Oklahoma City so they could continue their rebuild, or he would ask for out. And I'm not saying the Hawks will ever reach the Thunder's level right now. And I'm not even saying they won't trade Trae Young, but that's what this feels like to me, is that people have decided he needs to get traded. And so they're just going to focus on that. And if he does eventually ask for out or get moved, it's told you. Right. And it's just like it's more complicated than that to me.
Sure. Yeah. I think sometimes the news cycle is so gnarly though, that it can almost like bring things into being. It feels like that's not really how it works, but
it's almost, it might be the Damian Lillard scenario. I don't think Trae Young has expressed the type of loyalty that like publicly that Damian Lillard did to Portland. But like you just said, oh, Dame can't win there. He needs to ask for a trade. And everyone kept saying it. In year 6 of that, he finally did. It's like, right. We knew it all along.
I knew it. See, my take from 2015 was right. All right, we got to way to blow past the time, our purported time limit. The Boston Celtics are next. Do you want to lead off with this one, or should I give you my kind of issue / thing they got to figure out first?
Let's do mine first. My actual goal for them is just, hey, you need to get a Drew Holiday extension done. He's extension eligible on April 1st. He has a $40+ million player option. There's 2 elements to this. My primary concern or goal, it speaks to just how good the Celtics are. We both have the same late game concerns, which is why I'll throw it to you in a second. But it's twofold here. You gave up stuff you clearly won that trade, but you gave up stuff to get Drew Holiday. So you want to keep him. You don't want to put yourself in a scenario where he gets a contract offer in a free agent market that maybe Paul George gets interesting for. But like aside from then all of a sudden, if Drew Holiday's on the open market, does that get weird? And the other thing is just, if you sign him to an extension and you just know now, like just having the information of, oh, he declined the player option, he's on the smaller average annual salary, that's going to help you plan your very financially inflexible future a lot better moving forward than if you kind of have to figure out the number on the fly. And that will, I think, inform a lot of things where it's not just, okay, well, what do we need on the roster? What's the cap situation? But everyone's speaking of players that people have basically decided need to be traded. Jaylen Brown signed his supermax. And so it's, he's eventually going to need to be moved. It's not tenable. See how long you're going to be able to float this core. And part of that is we need to get Drew Holiday's next number, not just lower for next season, but on the books long term. And so I think that's just, if I'm the Celtics, everything is peachy keen here. Not like there are flaws, and we'll talk about them in a second, but like, let's get a Drew Holiday extension done. And that will just, I think, alleviate, stuff that happens in the playoffs. If you get blown out in the second round or something, there'll be an additional conversation, but allowing you to kind of get a jump on what your cap sheet looks like and how you can flesh out your team or plan your future around that. I think there's a lot more value in getting a Drew Holiday extension done now than if you were simply to opt out and then sign that deal later on.
Yeah. I think that's a wonderful contrast and a good illustration of the breadth of issues we can cover on this podcast, because I'm going to give you the talking head take of like, well, I guess maybe the goal that the Celtics should have is not necessarily like figuring out their late game offensive execution issues. It should be like shutting everyone up that won't stop talking about all of the, like, their concerns with their late game offensive execution issues.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's the type of thing they can't really, like, the balance of the regular season is not going to be where you find your answers for this. Like, although, like, almost letting the Bucks back in it tonight as we're recording, I don't know if you saw the end of that game, but it was not a game. And then the Celtics score like 18 points in the first 11 minutes of the fourth quarter, and the Bucks, 30 something. And it's just like, with no Giannis, and it's like, what are we doing, guys? Like, don't force us to keep talking about this stupid, it brushes up so close to the jump shooting teams can't win a championship that I physically cringe and hate it, because that's so stupid. But there is an element of that where it's like, oh, they just, when they make 23s like they did for 4 games in a row, I think it set a record recently, they're unbeatable. But then sometimes they go cold, and that happens at the worst times, and we're left watching Jason Tatum miss an open corner 3 that could have tied or beat the Nuggets a couple weeks ago. And it's just like, what are we doing? It's an issue, though. Like, we saw it, play a hand in them not winning a title in 22. We've seen it more than once this year. These cold spells at the end of games where Jason Tatum is, I don't know, people will say, not assertive enough, too willing to settle for a tough contested jumper, which he can get to, which is like a skill, and that's a great ability to have, but it's not satisfying for people that want him to just, find other ways to score. So, they're so good that this probably isn't going to be an issue until, like, I don't know, the finals maybe. But like,
especially given they did just let the Giannis-less Bucks back in the game.
They let them back. It just happens. It happens. And it, like, there's something, I don't know, maybe it's because it's been kind of the same issue for multiple years now, where it's like, it takes on a life of its own, and everybody kind of gets the here we go again feeling when the Celtics, run into these droughts late in games, and teams, make them competitive when they weren't for 3.5 quarters. That said, the Celtics still have a plus 5.6 net rating in fourth quarters, which is the best in the league. So it's just like, I don't know what to do with that. But it's a real thing, right? Like, it's one of these, it's a shot selection issue. It's it's all the, you can go on all the X's and O's, like the types of shots they're hunting, like who's on the floor. Like, is the 5-out thing just kind of baiting them into taking lots of threes because that's what you can generate with that kind of look? I don't know. But
I do think they've done a better job by and large of getting to the basket and varying up the script in high leverage moments. But you point me to the team, maybe it's Denver, that sticks to their functional script that late in games. It feels like everyone there, the offense always kind of bogs down because you're playing too conservatively and you're overthinking it. But to your point, I don't really have anything to add, just to back it up. So they do have, when you're looking at overall clutchness, they have a top 8 offense to go with a 19-10 record in those situations. That's not an issue on its face. Now, however, they are hovering around the bottom 10 of points scored per possession in the final 3 minutes of one possession games. They're in the bottom 5 of points scored per possession of one possession games in the final minute. It's like, this is a real issue, but it's sort of just like, your gold shoes are a little too tight because this team is so dominant.
Exactly. Like, what else are we going to talk about with a team this good? There's just like, you have to pick the thing that everyone like. Yeah, you're right. Your golden shoes are like, oh, there's a scuff on them or something. Is that a saying? Did we just make one up?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay.
Do we want to go to the Brooklyn Nets?
Sure.
What do you? Since I let us off the Celtics, what do you got for them?
It's just the Kevin Ollie thing. I think, it's always easy when like an assistant coach is always the good cop and the head coach is the bad cop. And then like when you're not getting minutes or whatever, it's the usually the former player, assistant coach that's like, in practice got his arm around you. Happy is I didn't make the decision to cut you out of the rotation. Like, I love you, or we're going to work through this. Like, so Kevin Ollie kind of gets to be that guy as an assistant coach, and lots of other assistants get to be that. And then they're the head coach. Like Jacques Vaughn used to be that guy, and then he was the head coach, and things change. So I think the Nets just kind of have to figure out, is Kevin Ollie really truly an interim guy? Is he someone we're going to have, as our, next 4 or 5, coaching contracts are always like 3 and 4 years now. Is that who we're going to invest in? Just the goal should just be to see, like, as a trial run down the stretch of the season, which is hard because there's injuries and it's just difficult to judge anything over the last like 15 plus games of the season, especially if you're not really contending for anything. But I think that's got to be the Nets focus, right? Like you could, I mean, I hope you'll talk about some other things to give us a little breadth here, but like that seems like the issue to me, is like, is Kevin Ollie the guy? I don't know. We'll find out.
So that's like kind of an extension of what I have. And it's basically, I need this team. And by that, I mean the front office or maybe owner Joe Tsai to accept the reality of their situation. And you had Sean Marks basically saying when Jacques Vaughn was fired that the Nets were too good to have a record this poor. That is mind-meltingly stupid. This team on paper, I'm sure we talked about it in the preseason, their highest end outcome was maybe they got a top 6 spot. And think about everything that needed to go right down to Ben Simmons being healthy and effective.
Right.
And to have that internal view of yourself and then not pivot off it just to trade Royce O'Neal, it's time to accept that something more extreme needs to be done. Now, what is the more extreme? I'm not saying they need to tear it down, although that's probably the route I would favor. But it's then you need to double down and identify the player who can actually accelerate your position. That's not a Donovan Mitchell level player. It needs to be someone better than that. And so you need to spend the rest of this season asking and answering critical, tough, awkward questions. The Kevin Ollie one is certainly, who's the next head coach? Is it Kevin Ollie? You're absolutely right on that. Mikal Bridges, it was open for debate after last year. He's clearly not the best player on a really good team. He's probably not even the second best player, at least unquestionably, on a really good team. You need to ask yourself, can you get the player who's better enough than him to put him in his proper spot in the pecking order? And also, do you trust that he's going to develop enough on-ball counters to deal with the extra defensive attention he's going to get, even if you bring in a different number one, even if you bring in the point guard, a different type of point guard? You also need to ask, hey, Cam Thomas is extension eligible this summer. Is he actually part of our core? What is his ceiling? We know what he could do as a scorer. We know from where he could do it. We've seen incremental improvement as a passer, as a three-point shooter. Can that scale up even further? Or I think he can be better than a microwave type of 6th man, but will he, one, what are the odds he reaches his top percentile of his outcome? And two, what are the odds that you're going to be good enough for that to matter if you're going to pay him? You also have to ask, are you the team that should really be paying Nick Claxton this offseason? That needs to be part. These are all questions that need to be part of, did we miss the boat on getting value for Dorian Finney-Smith? You can even ask the same question about Cam Johnson here. And so it's fine if they decide we want to keep this core intact, but it's not this core. When you look at this core, even if you think Mikal Bridges gets better on the ball and ratchets up the defense next season, even if you think that Cam Thomas has other levels to reach, even if you think that Nick Claxton still, he's improved incrementally every season, basically, as is, without a seismic shift in pecking order, this team is sub-mediocre. And it's time to accept that. How do you get out of that? Is it to strip it down, rebuild gradually? Or is it, we're going to go out there and get the guy that elevates us to probably not title contention, since those players really aren't available, but we know we can be a top 6 team in the East now. And I'm going to tell everyone right now, And I'm not saying he'll be available. The answer is not a Donovan Mitchell level type of guy who, look, he would have had a first team All NBA case if he didn't miss the games minimum now at this point. But like in any given season, you can't be, in any given season, Donovan Mitchell's that guy. It needs to be, that guy. It's the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's who you need if you want to get elevated. That guy's probably not out there, which is why I would probably favor the more gradual rebuild approach with this team.
I think to your point too, like you're just looking at a roster that is bottom 10 on offense, below average on defense, despite what I was sure was going to be like
we both were.
The kind of personnel that was just going to guard the shit out of everybody, and that hasn't really happened. They'd be a much more interesting because you got Bridges, you got Cam Johnson, you got Claxton if you bring him back, but like that's the profile of like a Chicago Bulls-esque like ceiling, and we are all very much on the record of that is not what you want. So yeah, you can't running it back.
Clutch team in the history of the NBA, Chicago Bulls.
You want to be the Chicago and DeMar DeRozan you want to be the Bulls in the last 5 minutes of close games, but otherwise you do not want to be the Bulls. Charlotte Hornets.
We want to move on to not the Bulls, but the Charlotte Hornets.
Yes. So this is I was going to say that for the Hornets, it's almost like a hypothetical because we may not see LaMelo the rest of the year. I think the goal should have, maybe we can put an asterisk next to it, but like at some point you're going to need to figure out how do LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller work together, because we've talked about this a little bit before, like the either or thing that has been raised by some people, or I think is just, it's what happens when you've got who you thought was your cornerstone and he's out of the picture for whatever reason. In this case, it's injury. And you've got another guy that shows up and it's like, do we reorient around this guy? Like, to me, that's a false choice. I think you need to see how they play off each other. And now that I'm discussing this, I think we have talked specifically about this. Like this should be an awesome tandem. Like the pieces fit, as Miller as a secondary guy, Ball as a primary distributor who, Miller can shield defensively. And LaMelo can be more of a distributor if you don't love that from Miller. So like, I think the Hornets' number one issue, like there's a lot going on there. Like I imagine they're going to have a new coach probably because you've got new management, even though Jeff Peterson has worked with Steve Clifford before and likes him. I think there's going to be some shakeups. We've already seen, they finally ripped the Gordon Hayward Band-Aid off, but like, those two guys are the franchise right now. And like, that's it. And you need to determine how well they're going to work together insofar as that's even possible right now. But the idea of like, we got to move one or the other seems insane to me. I think you've got to just find some indication of like how that's going to look going forward. And then what do you need around them?
Yeah, first of all, what are you going to get for LaMelo now? Because people are going to harp on this. I don't understand I guess there is an argument to be made. If someone bowls you over with an offer, maybe you listen to it. But like people thought, and I'm not saying he's going to have the same career outcome, but people thought Steph Curry was going to be a bust because of his ankles. He didn't get a max contract and he had one of the best contracts in NBA history, but like he turned out okay. And so like we need to give this time, especially when there's not redundancy there, which is why I went in the complete opposite direction, because this team, since LaMelo's injured, I don't know how much you can learn about them big picture. Right. We have learned that without LaMelo Ball, the half-court offense is going to suck. It might even suck with LaMelo Ball points. So I want to see them just crank it up in transition the rest of the year when I'm watching them. They have Vasilij Micic, who likes to operate a little bit more methodically, but he can get up and down the floor. You have Brandon Miller, which, by the way, your best half-court weapon right now is maybe a Brandon Miller pull-up jumper from the mid-range, which is like, good for you, Brandon Miller, but it's also not ideal. Yeah, and so like I think you can create advantages in transition, or at least that's how you're going to be most threatening. And just between Nick Richards, Miles Bridges, like I said, Trey Mann, that's someone who can get up and down the floor. You need to play faster. And since the trade deadline, basically, Charlotte is 26th in transition frequency. That climbs to 20th after an opponent miss, which still sucks. And just overall, they're 23rd in average offensive possession time. I'm not saying it'll always be pretty, but a way to offset the talent and creation deficit that you're clearly at, even with Micic, even with Trey Mann, even with what Brandon Miller has done, is to just play faster and get out in transition and just run the fuck out of the ball especially after opponent misses. And that's what I would just like to see them do, because I think that will help them gain more information outside of the LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, like snapshot that we want to see, and figure out what they're going to be long-term. It's all right. Well, who can play like this, or what do we have something here? And even if that's not what you learn, if you just want to be more competitive for the rest of the season, which they don't technically have an incentive to do, but I just want, like, they're a team that I think when I look at the personnel, it's kind of like, well, why aren't they running more?
Yeah. I mean, it's always I think that's always like, at least for your fans' sake, for crying out loud, at the end of seasons like this, like, let's put an entertaining product out there.
You're going to want to run when you have LaMelo anyway. It's
Sure.
like, let's have that like dynamic already in place for when he comes back, whether it's this season or
Right.
next season, with a lot of these guys that are still going to, like, it looks like Trey Mann and Micic, those are going to be guys that they want to keep around. Maybe they even decide to keep Bertans as sort of this human trade exception. So I need to see them. I agree with what you're saying. Like, let's just see what they'll know, but are we going to see that? So it's,
No,
while we
probably.
can't, run the shit out of the ball, please.
Yeah. Chicago Bulls, man, what do we even say about the Chicago Bulls?
Oh man,
Like,
I actually have stuff to say about the Chicago Bulls that is not stuff that you would think that I have to say about the Chicago Bulls.
oh, okay. Well, I'd just say real quickly, like, I'm not going to just say pick a direction, but I'll be more specific. You need to decide what you're willing to do in restricted free agency for Patrick Williams, who has shown some flashes, but like, I still don't really know what he's going to be.
And he's done for the year too, so you're not going to figure anything else out.
So you have less information than you were going to have. It's just like, it's confound. Like, he's a 40% 3-point shooter and he's a good defender, but like, he can't do almost anything else. Like, he can't dribble, he can't pass. Like, he's not a good, like, so I don't know what that's worth, but you've got the draft pedigree to consider. You've got the DeMar DeRozan situation where, are you extending him before July 1st? Are you going to let him hit free agency? What are you willing to pay to keep him? Like, and then what's that say about the direction of the team? That we've always, for however long, just hated the direction they have chosen / not chosen. So that's all the basic bull stuff, but I'm very curious to hear what yours is going to be.
So I am not late to, we all know I've been on the Ayo Dosunmu train for quite some time. Remember when we were going through free agents still available? I was like, some team needs to steal him from Chicago.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm 0 for a lot of takes. This one looks pretty good. I would like to see, and they've started doing it, and Will Gottlieb over at Chicago Sports wrote a fantastic piece about this. I want to see them explore the depths of Ayo Dosunmu's scoring package. And like, we know what he can do defensively. He's like 6'5" or whatever he is, but he can defend almost every position. His default mode is deference, and we've seen it. He's passing on over 51% of his drives, which is an incredibly high mark. I actually had this written down somewhere that among the 75 players who have used as many drives as Ayo Dosunmu, he's 4th in the share at which he passes, which is fine overall. If you're looking to generate rim pressure, especially, look, Zach LaVine is out for the year. Kobe White's dealing with some hip stuff at the moment. Now's the perfect time to do it. And we've seen the Bulls do it the past couple games. Is, can you get Ayo Dosunmu looking for his own shot outside of just hitting these set threes, which again, that's something he could do. Now, if you can add sort of a self-sustaining scoring package to it, we've seen some aggression from him in the pick and roll. He 81 or 82% of his pick and rolls end in a shot or a foul, which is fine. But like, those aren't follow throughs all the way to the basket. That's a lot of stuff that's happening from the in-between, or is it a simple high pick and roll and he's dribbling into a three? I want to see if they can get him moving downhill and being more aggressive as a scorer. And we've seen that in, as we're recording this, the Bulls' past 2 games where he goes off for, 34 points on a season high, 22 shots in that win over the Wizards, follows that up with 23-point detonation in the victory over the Blazers. I just want to see more of it. And now is the opportune time to do it because of the injuries, but also let's frame this in a bigger pit to tie it with what you said. Who on this roster do you look at and say, well, they need to be a part of whatever the Bulls decide to do next, whether it's rebuild, whether it's to double down on a trade? Kobe White is probably the only one. You already touched on the Patrick Williams uncertainty. And I think you could even make a case that I wouldn't do this, but like, Kobe White probably isn't going to be extendable on this deal because it's so absurdly team friendly.
Yeah, that 140% is not a big enough number off that.
Right. And so it's, well, if we're going to strip it down, I don't know that you could say that Kobe White needs to be a part of it because he might get way too expensive for you and outpace your trajectory. Whereas Ayo Dosunmu, you could run into that same issue, of course, but like, I'll say, give it to Kobe White. We know whatever the Bulls decide to do next, he should be on this roster. Is Ayo Dosunmu on that same level? I would argue yes, but I want to see more from him as a scorer. And I think now they're kind of built to see what he's able to do in that capacity.
It's nice that for him, even if the scoring doesn't ultimately become a part of his game, like that just means he's not going to be like a plus starter, but he'll be like, he's no doubt like a low end starter as it is, and maybe better than that. Maybe that undersells it. And he's for sure a rotation piece because of the versatile defense. You might know this because you've looked at some of this stuff. Do you want to guess what slip there. What Dosunmu's per 36 averages are for the season? Just points, rebounds, assists.
Ooh, I'm going to say it's points, rebounds, assists. I'll say 15, 8, and 9.
He's a 25 and 5 guy
Jesus
per 36. Like, I mean, Kobe White, just for, nobody really plays 36 minutes anymore. Kobe White's like 26, 7, and 6. But Dosunmu's efficiency numbers hold up just fine. 39% from 3. White's at 38.8. Like those two, like, do the Bulls just have their backcourt? Like,
is that just the backcourt of the future?
For a combined like under $20 million a year going
might
forward?
Be $20 million a year. Yeah, wow. And that's only for another 2 years or whatever it is. But still, wow.
I mean, So that's maybe that's the one thing the Bulls don't need to figure out is who's their backcourt. And like you said, whichever direction they go, like there's no teardown that also includes getting rid of those two guys. And there's no like, let's really go for it that doesn't include those two guys playing huge roles. So like,
I guess unless if going forward entails, well, we need to make a trade. Those are, I think, the top two. I guess it's Alex Caruso and then Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White. Like those are the 3 players on this roster everyone's gonna want. In those talks.
Right. Cleveland Cavaliers are next. I can lead us off here. I guess while you're time stamping. So the thing again, I keep running into these, but sorry, like the Cavs need to figure out, is Evan Mobley ready? And they don't get a lot of information about that down the stretch of the season because he was hurt and then he came back and then he's hurt again. And the Cavs are never allowed to have more than 2 of their 4 best players healthy. I think I've had the number. I think it's like 22 games that they've all 4 been healthy.
Yes, that is correct because I have that number written down as well.
It's insane. So like
they don't have a single lineup, by the way, 5-man lineup that is played in more than 22 games together.
And they're still like right there, which, it's unbelievable. I mean, we talk about coach of the year stuff. Like, I don't know, at some point we just have to say Bickerstaff has figured something out and has pushed some of the right buttons. So, but the Mobley thing, like dating back to this, I will never stop thinking about Mobley against the Knicks in the playoffs as a role guy, banging into 2 giant humans in the lane and not having a good place to kick it out to because Max Strus wasn't there at the time and no one's guarding Isaac Okoro or Karis LeVert or whoever's in the corner, and being unable to finish, make the quick decision, finish oversized, like all that stuff. Those were my biggest questions about Evan Mobley coming into the season. And that matters because Evan Mobley to me still is the guy that if the Cavs are going to level up, you said it, Donovan Mitchell's a great player. It's still like, the ceiling of this team is still, depends on Evan Mobley. And that's a rough place to be lately because I think it's fair to say he has not delivered on the hype that I heaped on him and that a lot of other people did. Some of that's been injury. Some of it has been performance. So I think the goal for the Cavs before they get into a situation in the playoffs where elimination is at stake is to figure out so when teams do against us what we know they are going to do, which is make Evan Mobley be an offensive focal point and make decisions. Is he ready for that? Don't know. May not know until elimination is at stake. But that seems like a pretty high priority issue for me.
Yeah, I would like to see. It also kind of comes back to the dual big stuff as well. It's not just about Evan Mobley. No, and I would like to see. There's been fewer than 50 possessions in which Sam Merrill has played with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. And he's someone who I think at this point opens up the floor for you, not as a playmaker like Max Strus does, but just as a pure floor spacer. And so if you're going to play him with those 2, you've now insulated him defensively and he'll fight defensively, like kind of like Max Strus, where it's, they're a little bit, Max Strus has better size, but like they will fight defensively more than people credit them. So I would like to see more of that and set it as a goal. I would also, one of the goals I had for them is like, let's keep this Darius Garland 3-point volume thing going. That's been on the climb. It is a little bit more like he's been done a better job of sort of playing in the Donovan Mitchell minutes. And so lately, and so it's like, well, how does that now impact the Donovan Mitchell is going to be out at least a little bit with that nasal procedure he had done. And so that's something to monitor. I think the goal for this team, because of how banged up they are and because of how many questions we have about the rotation, the bigs, even the guards playing together and who's going to be a part of the, the playoff, like will Isaac Okoro hit enough threes when you get to that stretch? They need, well, I won't say they need, but like, I didn't default to this. There are two teams that I think in the league that I think the playoff seeding matters a shit ton for right now. The Cavs are one of them. Lock up that number 3 seed so that you avoid Boston as long as possible. I think that's big. And if you can get number 2, just because of how injury riddled you are, you're right in contention there, and you own the tiebreaker over the Bucks now as well, which is a big deal too. You now guarantee yourself home court through the first 2 rounds. That's a pretty huge deal. And so if I'm this team, because you're in survival mode right now, and you're looking at who's behind you, the Sixers aren't going to come at you without Joel Embiid. The Magic they're frisky as hell. They have one of the top 6 net ratings since the end of January. So that's a team to worry about. The Knicks, OG Anunoby's out again. The elbow stuff is cropping up and didn't look the same when he came back. That's still been a team that's pretty deep. But can you fend off those 3 teams, maybe get the 2 seed? Like, that's a realistic goal for you. And I think that sets you up to be, okay, we're not going to have the information we need on our entire just arsenal. We found out a lot about our depth, like just knowing that you have the Sam Merrill lever to pull, and even some stuff with George Niang and Karis LeVert helping you push the pace. But you're not going to know enough about your full cast. And so it's like, let's just get a top 3 playoff seed so that we don't have to go through Boston. I mean, like, even, by the way, you might then avoid New York is still not a great matchup for them. Now, at least you ensure, okay, well, we're not going to see New York in the first round either if we finish with, that top 3, top 2 seed.
Yeah, I think that's all good. Let's get to the Detroit Pistons. Injuries have like made this team even harder to talk about. Like the Asar Thompson.
Yeah, good vibes to Asar Thompson with those blood clots.
Blood clot out for the season. Isaiah Stewart also out for the season. My goal for them was going to be like, can Monty Williams like quit screwing around and just start playing some lineups that like theoretically matter to the future? I think he's done more of that, but now you are going to be robbed. Like, is it me, or are we having more and more situations at this stage of the year where it's like the things the team needs to know are just like not knowable because of injuries? Like we just talked about Mobley. We're going to talk about the Pistons now. I forget already who else we mentioned that Patrick Williams is out, so the Bulls don't get any more information on him.
Well, LaMelo.
The Hornets, LaMelo Ball. Like, is it maybe I'm just like gravitating towards like I wish I knew more about teams that had a bunch of key injured guys, but like this keeps happening for our discussions.
I was texting with someone the other day and I said, I don't know if I say this every year, and so like maybe we need to keep the receipt on this, but I feel like I don't remember the onslaught of injuries ever being like this. And is it just this time of year and teams are a little bit more like in the case of the Wizards where it's okay, could Denny Avdia or Kyle Kuzma or Tyus Jones be playing? Sure. But we're looking at teams that have actual stakes here that are missing a bunch of guys. And so it just feels like there has been an increase in injuries this season, in like mission critical injuries. But we need to keep the receipts on this, because am I going to say this same time next year?
Well, right. Yeah. Like I kind of roll my eyes sometimes where it's like, oh, the injuries this year, it's like, no, guys get hurt every year. It's normal. But I mean, I don't know. It just, the feeling of it's like, it's undercutting all of the things I want to learn. Like we don't get to see if Monty Williams, like some of the things that the Pistons did were earlier this year were just like inexplicable, like sticking with Killian Hayes for as long as they did, setting up Asar Thompson to fail with some of the lineups they put around him that just made it so his lack of shooting was, there's just a giant spotlight on it. Like there are workarounds, like there, even go down to like was it sensible to have some veterans in there, especially some that were taking minutes from the young guys? So anyway, what I was going to say was I need Monty Williams to prove he can play lineups that at least make sense in terms of what you're hoping to find out about like the long-term future of the young players on this team. In some ways, I guess that's easier because now it's just Cunningham and Ivy, and let's hope that looks really good down the stretch, and Duran, I guess, to some extent. But I don't know. The Pistons got way less interesting the second Thompson was ruled out for the season to me, because I love Ivy. I think Ivy still has like massive potential. I've not sold any Ivy stock,
even on wide open threes.
Don't care. I'm not selling the stock. But Thompson was kind of like the reason to watch the Pistons for me if you're gonna like flip around and pick a game for a few minutes. So I don't have a lot to add to that.
So my primary goal for them was going to be, can we get, and some of this was awkward, to Asar Thompson, Cade Cunningham plus shooting lineups. And so that means Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren are not on the court. And frankly, I really don't give a fuck. I think that Asar Thompson and Cade Cunningham are the only players on this team that have established themselves as core players for the future. And so I wanted to see more of that. And the fact that they never got to this season, when you dig into the data, when they had Gallo, when they had Muscala, and we know they have Stewart, those two barely played with any one of those three guys at the 5. And that to me is, I don't know if that's on the front office, if that's on Monty Williams, but you know what it is? It's functional malpractice.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Now that Asar Thompson is, I hope he's okay. It sucks. The blood clot thing sucks. Long term, short term, that just sucks. Hopefully he's going to be all right. Now it's like, okay, can we get to Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren plus shooting lineups? But before I go into that, like some side quest would be, can we get Jaden Ivey to hit a wide open 3? Or even, I'll say this about Jalen Duren, and like how do I phrase this gently? Can they get him to stop branching out on offense? Like, I don't care about him attacking mismatches off the dribble anymore. If he can do that, that's great. But your offense is not going to be that much better for him doing that. And his defense, it feels like he's just not as, like, he can go, like, it feels like he's just less disciplined, less coherent on that end of the floor. Can we get Jalen Duren back on? I was so excited for him this season. And now it's like, I don't know. You could take me or leave me with Jalen Duren. So those would be some nice. Can they get Jalen Duren can they get him to start passing more again? Go dig into his passing splits. It's like, yeah, I'm not really going to pass out of the role anymore. Why would I do that? So, but even when you dig in, and this is, again, they are personnel strapped. When I say Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren plus shooters, it's, well, name the shooters, Dan.
Simone Fontecchio.
Yeah. So you have Simone Fontecchio, you have Evan Fournier, Quentin Grimes, in theory, before his injury, he wasn't making threes, but that would be a name to throw out there. Marcus Sasser. Let's get to those lineups. And look, Isaiah Stewart not being available makes it very difficult. Which is why I have Jalen Duren sandwiched in here. I will say this is a little bit of a travesty. Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, and Simone Fontecchio have tallied 20 possessions together without Ivy, Stewart, or Thompson in the game. And I know Stewart is technically a floor spacer, but not at the 4. That's just like that.
Not really.
Get to those lineups. And look, first of all, some of those players are Evan Fournier, Marcus Sasser, they're available. Everyone else is not. So I don't need to see like the James Wiseman in this anymore. I know he's had some like higher level moments with the Pistons. I don't care. It's just like the model needs to, first of all, the model is, because Cade Cunningham to me is that dude. And you could say, well, if he was that dude, the Pistons would be better. You show me the functional lineup that he has not been able to, like, that he should have shouldered to actual more wins. Cade Cunningham is that guy. The model is Cade plus shooting. It's so limited, and it's like Jalen Duren is there. Again, I really want it to be Cade and Asar plus shooting. That needs to be the goal to get to next season. And Jaden Ivey needs to prove then that he could be part of that makeup. That's what I want to see from the Pistons for the rest of this year, because outside of that, I just like Marcus Sasser, super intriguing, and Simone Fontecchio, I've come around on that acquisition. I thought they were being a little devil may care with the second round pick they gave up for him. I'm no longer there with that. But that's just where I'm at with, like, that's just sort of what I'm watching for. And yes, if Jaden Ivey could hit more wide open threes, or if Jalen Duren could be more of the player he was to start the season, that would be great as well, for sure.
Yeah, I'm with it.
We're now on to the final team for this part of the podcast, the Indiana Pacers. Grant, what you got for me? Or them, excuse me.
Well, it's for you too, but it is this is not a you problem. This is a Pacers problem, and you'll be free to comment on it. So long ago, Dan, you may recall that the Indiana Pacers were one of the darlings of the league, and during the in-season tournament, we could just not do anything but gush over how great their offense was, particularly that transition attack, how Tyrese Halliburton was Steve Nash, some idiot that looked and sounded like me probably made that comparison more than once. And just the way that he transformed the team and was so, just a generational offensive player. The Pacers offense has not been so hot lately. And did I say Tyrese Maxey? I hope I did. Tyrese Halliburton has not been nearly so good. And that's mostly due to the injury. So the question or the goal for them has just got to be figuring out how to, like, get back to where they were offensively. And we can talk about whether that's possible, because a pretty key piece that was running around and making a lot of threes and opening things up is not there anymore. So maybe that's not possible. And maybe you can't undo the hamstring that Halliburton has clearly been gutting through to try to get 65 games. More power to him. He should be doing that. That's a lot of money. But yeah, so like I just wanted to flag that as I'm looking up what Halliburton's splits are, because basically since the injury, we can use the All-Star break kind of like as a proxy for that. He's been shooting like 30% from three. He's down from like 26 and 13 to more like 19 and 8. Like it's just the numbers are totally different for him and by extension for the Pacers. So if they're going to do anything in the playoffs, certainly they got to find some of that juice on offense down the stretch here.
Tyrese Halliburton is the biggest fraud in the everyday. Am I doing the podcasting thing right? No,
stop it.
I'm with you on that. And so I want to hat tip on Locked On Pacers, Tony East from Forbes and Caitlin Cooper of Basketball She Wrote had a fantastic discussion about what's kind of changed for the Pacers since the Siakam trade. And the thing that I have flagged, but it was since the trade deadline, is that, and this steps on the Tyrese Halliburton is a part of this. They need to recapture their transition mojo. And I know they're still 8th, by the way, in point. This is points scored per possession since the trade deadline. But like when your defense caps out at, we're 24th instead of 26th, your offense can't afford to just be 8th.
Yeah, the difference between 2nd and 8th is enormous when you're almost bottom 5 defense.
Right. And so I'm noticing they're not pushing as much off of opponent misses. And it's not even close. They are, so before the trade deadline, almost 32% of their possessions after grabbing a defensive board led to transition opportunities. That was the 6th largest share in the league. Since the deadline, the Pacers' fast break frequency following opponent misses has dipped to 25.9%. It's that's a huge, when you're looking at the proportion of what it was, that's a huge dip, and it's a bottom 10 frequency now. And so you start to get into Caitlin Cooper and Tony East talked about a lot of the Halliburton Siakam stuff, which I'll touch on in a second, but you're missing Buddy Hield, who was a huge part of what you did in transition, just as someone who runs the floor, his decision-making in there, as Caitlin Cooper and Tony East talk about the ghost screens that he's going to set. And so missing him is a big part of this. And now it's gotten even harder to approximate what you're missing from him, because Benedict Mathurin is done for the season, and he has somewhat quietly on a national level improved as a three-point shooter. So in the backdrop of all of that you have to deal with, you're now trying to integrate Siakam while also dealing with a Tyrese Halliburton who is a shell of the player he was. And I think it's not because Tyrese Halliburton actually, it turns out he's not the biggest fraud in the NBA. If anyone didn't catch the grift there, but he's still injured, or he's just not right. And so these things are compounding upon one another. And I think some of it has been, they're trying to explore what you can do with Halliburton and Siakam. And so Halliburton is playing off the ball a lot more. They've almost tried to use him at points like they would Buddy Hield. And that's just a weird spot for them to be, especially when you're compounding it with the injury he's going with. I don't know. Go ask Caitlin Cooper what they could do to do this. And part of it is maybe you should slow down when you have Pascal Siakam, because he can do that stuff in the half court and attack mismatches when you get them. But also is it do we get to a point where we've seen some more Siakam plus bench mob lately? Is it kind of tweaking the parameters to, let's make sure the bench mob that's with him can get out and run in those instances if we don't think that the starters can do that as much anymore. And the starters can still, they're not the lineup that's the issue when you're looking necessarily at this transition frequency. So that they need to figure out a way to regain that, because that's how they disarm teams, is to run in every situation. And yes, it's great that they can run off turnovers. They're not a team. They don't rank first in the league in forcing opponent turnovers. And so that's going to be such a smaller share of, and by the way, even that frequency has dropped off a little bit. And that is such a crux to what they were doing. I fully recognize, though, that if Tyrese Halliburton isn't Tyrese Halliburton, forget the Buddy Hield absence, now the Benedict Mathurin absence. If Tyrese Halliburton really isn't even close to full strength, that's just out the window. But if you can get him, if he's going to get healthier, if you can just figure out ways where maybe it's Siakam when he's on his own, to get those lineups to run a little bit more, or to cater to the lineups with Siakam and the bench that are running off opponent misses more, I think that really does a service to your offense, where I look at this team and I just don't see the pathway to them having a much higher defensive ceiling, which is why I focused on that. And the pathway might just be, can Jarris Walker really muck up stuff defensively if sort of this wing defender? I don't like they tested him out a little bit more this side of the All-Star break of the trade deadline. I don't have a ton of belief in that, especially as their rotation is going to shrink down for the postseason.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask too. I wanted to get the Halliburton numbers because they're much worse the splits than I let on. So this isn't a perfect situation because the injury didn't just happen at the All-Star break. So really what this does is it's dragging down his pre-All-Star break numbers a little bit too. But before the break, 42 of those were starts. He had that weird minutes limit thing. 21.8 points, 11.7 assists, 62.6 true shooting percentage, like just phenomenal. Since then, 13 games post All-Star break. Doesn't count his game tonight, which is actually halfway decent, but still not vintage Halliburton. 15.8 points, 9.8 assists. Okay. 41.7% from the field, 21.3% from three. So like
That is
it's
low.
just it's not the same guy. It's not even close. Because in theory, like making him, hey, Tyrese, go do a Buddy Hield impersonation for like half of this quarter. Like the first half, Tyrese Halliburton could do that because he's a dangerous shooter off movement. Like the guy shooting 21% can't help you there either. His usage is down. That's partly Siakam being there. It's partly because like I think he just isn't capable right now physically of doing the same things he was. But yeah, and it'd be great if you could get out and run too. But Halliburton's a huge driver of that, and maybe he can't do that either. It's an oversimplification, but like when you clearly have a different player than you did for the first half of the season, or really like the first third, I guess would be more accurate. It's really hard to get anything done. So I don't know. It's going to be tough sledding for the Pacers, at least until that hamstring is all the way back.
Stat padding time. Do you have any for me this week, Mr. Hughes?
I do, Dan. I'm going to sit up straight. And I'm going to get nice in frame here so that in the event you want to cut these up, it'll be easier to do that. These are about career scoring average, and I'm hopeful that I haven't given you any of these before. Pretty straightforward. Dan, which NBA player had the higher career scoring average? Or let me try that again. Dan, which NBA player has the higher career scoring average? Luka Doncic or Kevin Durant?
Luka Doncic.
That is correct. 28.6 to 27.3. Allen Iverson or Trae Young?
Trae Young.
It is Allen Iverson, 26.7 to 25.6. Dan, who has the higher scoring average? Zion Williamson or Kobe Bryant?
Kobe.
Just barely. 25 even to 24.8. These modern guys, just the numbers. I don't know if you heard Dan,
but games too, which helps him. Zion, right. That is, but
it's a new world. Dan, which NBA player has the higher career scoring average? Devin Booker or Kyrie Irving?
Devin Booker.
It is Devin Booker, correct. 24.2 to 23.5. Damian Lillard or Stephen Curry?
I'm going to say Steph Curry.
Incorrect. It is Damian Lillard. That one surprised me. 25.1 to 24.8. These are all going to be close. Joel Embiid or James Harden?
Ooh, I'm going to say Joel Embiid.
It's Embiid actually by kind of a lot. 27.8 to Harden at 24.3. Those early OKC years, I think, are dragging it down a little bit.
And maybe with the Clippers too, as well as even last season with what did he average in Philly last year? Wasn't
like
that
20 a year, maybe not even 20. Yeah, that's true. All right, Dan, who has the higher career scoring average? Karl Anthony Towns or Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Karl Anthony Towns.
It's Giannis, 23.3 to 22.9. Little throwback here. Dwayne Wade or Carmelo Anthony?
Dwayne Wade.
It is Carmelo, 22.5 to 22 even. Last one here. Higher career scoring average, Dan. Anthony Davis or Russell Westbrook?
Oh, Anthony Davis.
Correct. Not particularly close. 24 per game, which is higher than I would have guessed for AD probably. Russ is at 21.8. Had some early and late year drag downs, I think, on those numbers. Pretty good success rate by you. These were all really close, so I made it kind of tricky on purpose. That
was a good one. I liked that one.
All right. What do you got?
That it?
That's it.
All right, I have a bunch for you. I'm going to sandwich the offbeat one in the middle. So let's start with this. Buckle up, Grant. Which NBA legend would be better in 2024, assuming they're in their prime, their peak? Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan?
Michael Jordan.
Hakeem Olajuwon or David Robinson?
Oh man. I think Olajuwon. They probably would have stretched him out to 3.
Kevin Garnett or Dirk Nowitzki?
Garnett.
Tim Duncan or Shaquille O'Neal?
Oh. I think it's got to be Shaq.
Carmelo Anthony or Paul Pierce?
Pass.
No.
I'd say, I mean, we've seen Carmelo pretty close to 2024. I'll still say Melo. Why not?
Ray Allen or Reggie Miller?
I think Ray Allen, the athleticism, people forget the athleticism he had as a driver.
Yeah, early career Ray Allen for sure. I'm with you there. Charles Barkley or Scottie Pippen?
Ooh. I think probably Pippen, just because he would be the 5-position defender that everybody wants now. And then, I mean, there's nothing he couldn't really do.
Jason Kidd or Steve Nash?
I think Nash. I think kids shooting, at least early career kids shooting, would have been a problem for the modern game.
Manu Ginobili or Allen Iverson?
Manu Ginobili. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second name, so it's just going to be Manu for me.
It was Manu or Allen Iverson.
Yeah, no, I know. It has to be Iverson, right? Like he would be. Well, it depends how physical. How physical can you be with him now? The rules changed like a month ago, so I don't know.
Good point. That's a good. Oh, Magic Johnson or Dwayne Wade?
I think Magic, because you really could play him at center.
Yeah, I would agree. Larry Bird or Oscar Robinson?
I cannot confess to having a great sense of what Oscar Robertson's game was like, other than he played in an era that was super fast. So the numbers are nuts. I mean, I think probably Bird, because you'd get it's so hard. I don't know. I don't feel qualified to say, but I'll go Bird.
Patrick Ewing or Dennis Rodman?
I think Ewing. I think Rodman is still just like, although, I mean, would Rodman kind of be like a Sar Thompson? Is that, just the best athlete on the floor that could guard everybody, but couldn't do anything else with the ball? I don't know.
Chris Bosh or Pau Gasol?
That's a close one. I think I might go Gasol, especially if it's like prime Gasol, because you can get 6 assists out of that guy too, in addition to everything else.
I just wonder if Bosh, because of the mobility he had defensively, might be like the better. I know Pau Gasol did a lot of like really good traditional big man stuff there. You're probably right just because of the passing.
It depends if you get like I can shoot threes Chris Bosh, or if you get Raptors Chris Bosh. I think, because he kind of was 2 different players. And yeah, that's a good one though. I mean, they'd both be awesome. We could agree there.
Vince Carter or Tracy McGrady?
I think McGrady. McGrady was the better player then, I think, at his peak. And I think he would only be like, who is McGrady in the modern game? Like, is he close to like between Paul George and Kawhi, basically somewhere? I think that's pretty good.
Walt Clyde Frazier or Gary Payton?
Ooh. That's so tough because you don't have I think I'd probably go Payton just because that defense is going to play.
That is all I have for you in that block. How'd you feel about those mashups?
Man, that's tough. I wasn't ready for opinion questions. I like the comparisons though. They're forcing.
Do you know who I left out on purpose because I just assumed he would be the answer no matter who I pitted him against, except for Jordan?
Oh, no, I don't know who. Should I?
Grant Hill.
Oh, yeah, right.
I kept like trying to put him in there, and I was just like, no, like I would like no. I even thought about. I was like, if I did Grant Hill or Michael Jordan, no one's gonna pick Grant Hill, but I might make a case.
I mean, Grant Hill really didn't develop a 3-point shot until the Suns like made him into a corner shooter. But just like Grant Hill is what Ben Simmons should have been. Like that's the type, like just this giant forward that could get wherever he wanted on the floor, except Grant Hill could really finish. Oh yeah. He was way too early and gone from his prime too soon too. The ankle injury just like completely wrecked him. Him and McGrady were supposed to do incredible things in Orlando.
Oh, imagine them together. Like if they had never gotten hurt and were just at their peaks, my God.
And well, do you remember too, like, I don't know how real this was. I think it was sort of real. Like Tim Duncan was going to be there too.
Yeah, that was, and then there was the whole like, what do you have, a pillow fight with Greg Popovich or something and save the day or whatever?
Probably, I don't know. Sounds right. That it?
I have two more blocks. This one's a little offbeat, and it's per my own TikTok research. Can you guess the NBA player's favorite food? Which NBA player's favorite food is allegedly goji berries? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Russell Westbrook?
Thank you for giving me options, by the way, because that was going to be tough to do it cold. I'm going to say SGA. He seems like a goji berry kind of guy.
Yeah, he's not. It's Russell Westbrook. Which NBA player's favorite food is allegedly roasted pumpkin? Paolo Banchero or Scotty Barnes?
Oh, what a weird choice. I'm going to say Scotty Barnes.
Incorrect. It's Paolo Banchero.
What's going on with the roasted pumpkin?
Which NBA player's favorite food is allegedly fish stew? Giannis Antetokounmpo or Nikola Jokic?
Sounds like Jokic to me.
That is correct. Which NBA player's favorite food is allegedly just Taco Bell? Tyler Hero or Tyrese Maxey?
Oh, man. Guys, don't eat that unless we get a sponsorship. I'll say Tyrese Maxey.
It's Tyler Hero.
That's not a good life choice.
Which NBA player's favorite food is allegedly chicken nuggets? Donovan Mitchell or Jamal Murray?
I'm going to say Jamal Murray.
That is correct. You did 2 of 5. That's not bad there. That was just, I figured that would be like a fun random one.
I felt really good about the fish stew. The only one I had any.
I couldn't figure out a good. I couldn't figure out a good like one to. I had to put fish stew in there because it was fish stew.
Right.
I was like, if I say Jokic and anybody else, it's probably just always obviously going to be Jokic. And so I was trying to think of the player, and I was like, I'm not going to go with like Davis Bertans or Alexei Pokusevsky type deal. I didn't want to do that.
That would have been too mean. I did when you said Giannis, because you said Giannis first, and I was like, oh, well, that's going to be Giannis. If you give me like Giannis or I don't know, like Mark Williams. So it's like, all right.
You want to know what Giannis's favorite food? I don't know how accurate this is, so I don't even know if I'll cut it up. I might anyway, just because it's like something different. Do you want to know what his favorite food allegedly is?
Yes, I do.
Egg sandwich.
Egg sandwich. That's pretty basic. Like no specifics, not a McMuffin, not anything.
Someone's, I can't remember who it was, but they were very specific. I think it was Trae Young, was like eggs on bread or something like that I saw.
Bread.
It's like an egg sandwich on bread, like type deal. But
all right. I mean, that's the same.
Scrambled eggs on some toast?
Yeah, every day. I love scrambled eggs. It's delicious.
Okay, final one for you, but it's a huge block. Got 25 questions for you. And these are not opinion based, if that makes you feel any better.
A little bit.
Which NBA player has more 25-point, 10-assist games for their career in the playoffs and regular season?
Okay.
LeBron James or Oscar Robinson?
I'll say Oscar.
It is Oscar, and it's not even close. 361 to 228 for LeBron. James Harden or Russell Westbrook?
I'll go with Harden.
That is correct. He's got Russell Westbrook by 9 in this category. Magic Johnson or Jerry West?
I'm going to say West.
That is incorrect. It's not even really that close. Magic Johnson 162 to Jerry West 137.
Okay. That's pretty close. Come on.
25 games? I don't know. Luka Doncic or Trae Young?
Trae.
That is correct. Has him beat fairly handedly as well. Nikola Jokic or Chris Paul?
Oh, the 25 is tough for Paul. I'm still going to say Chris Paul.
That is correct. 124 to 88 for Jokic. Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan?
I think I'll go Jordan.
That is correct. 72 to 40. Steph Curry or John Wall?
Oh, I think it's John Wall.
You are a hater. It is Steph Curry, 78 to 64.
Oh, at least it was close.
Stephon Marbury or John Stockton?
Again, the 25 is tough. I think I better go Stockton.
You clearly do not support science. It's Stephon Marbury, 62 to 60.
Oh.
Larry Bird or Allen Iverson?
Iverson.
That is correct. It's not even 83 to 64. Gilbert Arenas or Devin Booker?
Agent Zero. Let's go.
Incorrect. Devin Booker, 25 to 23.
Oh.
Kyrie Irving or John Morant?
It has to be Kyrie. Jaws had like 3 full healthy seasons.
Yes, but it's fairly close. 33 for Irving, 28 for John Morant.
Painfully close.
He would have had him beat if he didn't get injured this year.
Yeah, would have got him this year.
Tracy McGrady or Rajon Rondo?
Again, the 25 is really hanging me up. How many times did Rondo score 25? I'll say McGrady.
That is correct. 20-14. De'Aaron Fox or Derrick Rose?
It's got to be Fox.
Correct. 28-21. Tyrese Halliburton or Fat Lever?
Fat Lever's back. It's okay. Is he trying to trick me? I mean, I'll say Fat Lever. How about that?
You'll be incorrect. Fat Lever 18, Tyrese Halliburton 26.
Damn it, Fat. What's his real name? Do we know? Do we know what Fat Lever's name is?
It's not just Fat.
No, we'll look. I'll look it up while you're asking me a question.
Okay, next one. Now you made me lose my spot because you're questioning what Fat Lever's real name is.
Don't you want to know too? Well,
I do kind of.
Lafayette.
Fat is way cooler.
Both cool.
Grant Hill, or anyway, let's get back to this. Grant Hill or Donovan Mitchell?
Grant Hill.
Correct. 12-7. LaMelo Ball or Monte Ellis?
Oh my guy. I'll say Monte.
Correct. 15-10. Brandon Ingram or Pascal Siakam?
Siakam.
That is correct by a hair. 7-6.
Ouch.
Giannis Antetokounmpo or Jason Kidd?
Jason Kidd.
Correct. 44-37. I didn't think you were going to get that one. Kevin Durant or Kyle Lowry?
Why is Kyle Lowry in this question? Kyle Lowry.
Incorrect. 30-25 in favor of Durant. Baron Davis or Steve Nash?
Nash.
That is correct. It's not even close. 72-46. Cade Cunningham or Andre Iguodala?
I'll say Iguodala. Long career.
Incorrect. 7-6 in favor of Cade.
He was too unselfish.
Joel Embiid or Kevin Garnett?
Embiid.
That is correct. 7-6. Brandon Jennings or Hakeem Olajuwon?
Hakeem.
Incorrect. 7-3 for Brandon Jennings. Paul George or David Robinson?
Paul George.
Incorrect. David Robinson 4-2. Jalen Brunson or Julius Randle?
That's a great question. I'll say Brunson.
That is incorrect. They are tied with 5. Bam.
Oh, the tie. He snuck a tie in. I respect it.
And that's how we close. I did think, because people have complained that all we do is the coin toss ones where they're super close. I thought I mixed that one up nice amount.
I was not more or less confident, but like they all seem like they're going to be close in most cases. And you're really good at every time you throw Steph in there, I never pick him. And I feel like you know that now. And so it's, I don't know if I've gotten Steph Curry as a correct answer in a long time.
No, you always don't pick Steph. It's absolutely mind blowing. What was the one I was actually surprised? I thought you were going to get the Marbury one very easily, by the way.
Who was he against? I already can't remember.
John Stockton.
Oh, I mean, Stockton had like 1 trillion 10 assist games, though. How hard is apparently very hard. How hard is it to get 25 points? Like real tough for some guys.
What was the one? What did I say? I was surprised that you actually got that one. Did you? No, you went with Agent Zero for Booker. I thought you were going to get that one. There was one that I thought that you got that I didn't think you were going to get. Now I can't remember what it was. So apparently
that's Fat Lever. Fat Lever is the ultimate red herring. I never know what to do when you put Fat Lever on.
I'm telling you though, if you like do all these crazy ass statistical like sorts, that he shows up in all of them.
Well, I don't know. Well, okay, I can see why. Because he's got a run. I'm looking at his basketball reference page now. 2-time All-Star Fat Lever. Shout out. He had a run from 86, 87 to, let's call it 89, 90, where he's like, he never averages 20, but he's like 18, 19, but then he's like 8 boards or 9 boards and 8 assists, like up in that range. So like, I guess if you're looking for probably triple doubles, he comes up a fair amount because he was getting, 19, 9, and 10, pretty frequently.
It's funny too, because the name that we call him just sounds like a directive you would give to people on an assembly line. Like it's the Fat Lever. Like, right? Like that's what you gotta put. Do you want to take us out of here?
Sure. We might need to start shouting out Fat Lever. Well, I mean, we'll see. Everybody, thanks for listening, for tuning in. If you watched us on YouTube, thank you. We didn't do any guest players, so I'm not going to thank anybody. We'll do that another time.
Fuck all
However,
you guys. No one
if
cares.
you would like to contribute to that effort or to stat padding, if you've got any cool ideas, join our Discord. That's where we get a lot of our information from. And you can get the links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. As always, please remember to rate, review, subscribe. Tell your friends. Word of mouth is very helpful. We'd like to grow this podcast with your help. That becomes easier. I think that's going to do it. As always, we'll close with a shout to Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen.